Section 9.3, we're going to look at the double and the half angle identities. Okay, so here are your double angles. Sine only has one formula. Cosine has 3. And it doesn't matter which one you use, it'll always come out to the same exact answer. And then tangent only has 1. Okay, so if we look at finding the exact value, so I need a fraction and not a decimal, of sine of 120 using the double angle formula. Okay, well, here's the double angle formula for sine. So the first thing that we're going to do is figure out what theta should be. Okay, so this 2 theta, that's the same thing as this 120. So we're going to set them equal to each other. And then solve for theta, so divide by 2. So theta is going to be 60. Okay, so sine of 120 is equal to 2 sine of 60 times cosine of 60. Okay, so then we need a 60-degree angle. So 60, 90, and 30. It's going to be 1, square root of 3, and 2. So we got 2 times sine of 60. That's going to be the square root of 3 over 2 times cosine of 60, and that's going to be 1/2. Okay, now notice you've got a 2 and a 1/2, so half of 2 is 1, or they just cancel out, and I'm left with the square root of 3 over 2 as my final answer. So if we find the exact value for cosine of 120 using the double angle formula, we have 3 to pick from, and I'm going to show you all 3 and how all 3 come out to the same answer. So same thing, we're going to set 2 theta equal to whatever angle they give us, which in this case is 120. We're going to solve for theta, so it's going to be 60. And I'm going to use this first formula right here. So cosine of 120 is equal to cosine squared of 60 minus sine squared of 60. Okay, so 60 degrees, 90, and 30. This is 1, square root of 3, and 2. Okay, so this is going to be cosine of 60 is 1/2. Make sure you don't forget this little square. Minus, okay, sine of 60 is square root of 3 over 2. Square that number. Okay, so it's like we are squaring the 1 and the 2 and the square root of 3 and the 2. So this is 1 over 4 minus 3 over 4, which is 1 minus 3 all over 4. Okay, and then that's the same thing as negative 2 over 4. Take a 2 out of both of them, or negative 1/2 will be your final answer. Okay, so let me show you how to work out this second one. Okay, same thing, we're going to take 2 theta, set it equal to 120, and we already know that this is going to be 60. Okay, so I'm going to plug in 60 wherever I see theta. So we've got cosine of 120 is the same thing as 1 minus 2 sine squared of 60. So 1 minus 2, and then sine of 60 is going to be square root of 3 over 2. But make sure you don't forget this little square right here. Okay, so we got 1 minus 2 times, so the square root is going to get a 2, or squared, and the 2 is also going to be squared. So 1 minus 2 times 3 over 4. I got a 2 in the top and a 4 in the bottom, so I can take a 2 out of both of those. So that's going to be 1 minus 3 over 2. I'm going to convert this 1 to a 2 over 2. This is still a form of 1. So 3 over 2. So this is 2 minus 3 over 2, which would be negative 1/2 again. Okay, and then let me show you how to work this last formula right here. So same thing, 2 theta is equal to 120. Solve for theta. So theta is 60. So cosine of 120 is equal to 2 cosine squared of 60 minus 1. So cosine of 60 is 1/2. Make sure you don't forget to square it. Minus 1. So this is 2 times 1 squared over 2 squared minus 1. So this is 2 times 1/4 minus 1. 2 in the top, 2, I can take a 2 in the bottom. So that's going to give me 1/2 minus 1. I'm going to change that 1 to a 2 over 2. So 1/2 minus 2 over 2. So now it's 1 minus 2 all over 2, or negative 1/2 again. So it doesn't matter which one you use because they're all going to come out to the same exact answer. So pick your favorite and roll with that one. Okay, now if we're trying to find the exact value of tangent of 120 using the double angle formula. So here's our formula. So 2 theta is equal to the angle that they give us, 120. Solve for theta. So theta is 60. Wherever I see a 60 in this formula, that's where, or a theta in this formula, that's where I'm going to put 60. So tangent of 120 is equal to 2 times tangent of 60 divided by 1 minus tangent squared of 60. Okay, well, tangent of 60, that's going to be y over x. So that's just going to be square root of 3 over 1, or just the square root of 3. So we have 2 times the square root of 3 over 1 minus the square root of 3 squared. So this is 2 square root of 3 over 1 minus 3. That's the same thing as 2 square root of 3 all over negative 2. My 2's will cancel. I'm left with negative square root of 3 as my final answer. Okay, then let's look at our half angle identities. We only have one for sine, one for cosine, but then we have 3 options for tangent. And just like cosine with the double angle formulas, it doesn't matter which one you use, they all come out to the same exact answer. So since it doesn't matter which one I use, I wouldn't pick that one right there. That one looks pretty complicated. The one I would pick is probably this one right here, but either one will work. Okay, so let's look at this one. Find the exact value of sine of 75 using the half angle formula. So we're going to use this formula right here. And so I'm going to set this right here, the alpha over 2, equal to the angle that they gave us, the 75, and then solve for alpha. So I need to multiply both sides by 2. So alpha is equal to 150. Then whenever I have an alpha here, I'm going to plug in 150. So sine of 75 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine of 150 all over 2. Okay, so 150, that is in the second quadrant. So this is 150. This will have a reference angle of 180 minus 150, or 30. There's 90, there's 60. This is square root of 3, and it's negative. Here's 1, and here's 2. So cosine of 150 is going to be negative square root of 3 over 2. Okay, so this is going to be plus or minus the square root of 1 minus the square root of 3 over 2, and that's all over 2. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply both the top and the bottom by 2 over 2. 2 over 2. So this entire thing times 2, this entire thing by this 2 right here. So this is going to be plus or minus the square root of 2 minus the square root of 3 all over 4. So this 2 times 1, this 2 times the square root of 3 over 2, 2's cancel out, and this 2 times this 2, which will give us 4. And now I've got a fraction inside of a square root, so we're going to break that up. Plus or minus square root of 2 minus the square root of 3 all over the square root of 4, which that is plus or minus the square root of 2 minus the square root of 3 over 2. Okay, now the last thing is to decide, do I use the positive or the negative sign here? Well, notice what we're looking for. We're looking for sine of 75. Okay, 75 is in the first quadrant, and sine of anything in the first quadrant is going to be positive. So this is going to be positive square root of 2 minus the square root of 3 divided by 2, and that would be your final answer. Okay, if we look at cosine of 75, we're going to find the exact value and use the half angle formula, which here's our formula right here. We're going to take the alpha over 2 and set it equal to 75 to figure out what alpha should be, because I have an alpha right here. So alpha over 2 is equal to 75. Multiply both sides by 2, so alpha is 150. So cosine of 75 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 plus cosine of 150 divided by 2. Okay, just like the last problem, this is 150. It will have a reference angle of 30. There's 90, there's 60. There's negative square root of 3, there's 1, and there's 2. Okay, so plus or minus the square root of 1 plus negative square root of 3 over 2, the whole thing divided by 2. So I'm going to do the same thing as last time. I'm going to multiply both the top and the bottom by 2, just so I can knock out this fraction right here. So plus or minus the square root of 2 minus the square root of 3 all over 4. Then break it apart. So square root of 2 minus the square root of 3 all over the square root of 4, which is plus or minus the square root of 2 minus the square root of 3 all over 2. Okay, last thing to decide is, do I use the positive or the negative? And since we're looking at 75, which is in the first quadrant, and cosine of anything in the first quadrant will be positive, so this is the square root of 2 minus the square root of 3 all over 2. And I do need to go back to this one right here and correct something. We said cosine of 150, that was negative square root of 3 over 2. But I also have a negative sign right here. So this should have a negative right here. The negative times the negative, this should have been positive. So this should have been your final answer for sine of 75. I have a positive here, and then I used a negative square root of 3 over 2 right here. Okay, so a negative times a positive, that would have given me a negative. Okay, then let's look at find the exact value of tangent of 15 using the half angle formula. So I'm just going to show you this one right here. That I believe this one is the easiest one to use. So we're going to set alpha over 2 equal to the angle they gave us. So alpha over 2 is equal to 15. Multiply both sides by 2. So alpha is equal to 30. So tangent of 15 is equal to sine of 30 divided by 1 plus cosine of 30. Okay, so sine of 30 is going